Okay, good morning. Welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Commission. It's Thursday, the 21st of December. We'll start with agenda item number 1, which is the minutes from our meeting held on the 9th of November. Are Commission members happy that they're a true and accurate record, please? Yes. Thank you very much. I shall sign those. Item 2, apologies and substitutes. Teresa.
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies from Councillor Land, and Councillor McCambridge is here as his substitute, and apologies from Councillor Eagle. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you for substituting Hazel. Moving on to Chairman's announcements. Nothing specific, but I'm sure you've all noticed that we've got quite a long agenda today. As usual, if you could keep any contributions relevant to the agenda item, I'm always keen to get as much debate as we possibly can from any member that wants to speak. So we'll try and get through all of the business in a reasonable amount of time. So please bear that in mind when making your contributions. Item 4, urgent business, and there's no urgent business today. Item 5, does anybody have any declarations of interest, please? None showing, thank you. Item 6, non-members wishing to address the meeting. I've seen a few of you in the room. If you wish to contribute, please do so, and I shall call on you to speak when you indicate. That leads us straight on to item 7. This is the second of our Cabinet member portfolio presentations. Thank you ever so much, Paul, for being the second person to go. And we're going to hear about your property, projects and procurement portfolio, Triple P. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Teresa, if you could show the presentation, please, that accompany this brief presentation. As the Chairman has stated, members of the Commission, I'd like to have a brief overview in terms of what all the Ps do, property, procurement and the other one. We'll test you on that later on. Want to have a look in terms of some of the things that are happening, what some of the challenges within the portfolio, and what the future might look like as we move forward within the portfolio. I've always wanted to say this. Next slide, please. Can you just go back one? That's even better. Right, next slide. Leave it, Teresa. That's me being cheeky. If we think about it, everything that we do as a council has got a process or a service or a series of activities that underpin it. And this particular portfolio looks at everything that is required to support the provision of our services as a council, which is delivering good services to our businesses and to our residents. Very crudely, what this portfolio seeks to do is to exploit the value of our tangible, our intangible, and our real assets on behalf of all of our residents within the district, whether that be increasing the revenue or reducing our costs moving forwards. This is a complex council with lots of moving parts and lots of people delivering on those services, and it's a small team that manages those areas in front of you. So I want to briefly have a quick look at asset management, property management and commercial agency. Members will recall that we did an all-member briefing following the most recent council meeting, which I'm delighted was well attended and had some really good questions around it, around how we manage our commercial property portfolio. And then I want to think in terms of the other elements of the piece: procurement, legal, complaints and some corporate projects as the rest. If I think, Teresa, next slide, please. If I think in terms of our assets, as you probably guessed, Breckland is a complex council with some weird things under our control. We own some 2,300 streetlights, which weren't transferred over to towns and one parish about 20 odd years ago. Those streetlights still do cause some frustration for at least one member not in this room, who always argues what a special responsibility allowance applies whenever a special responsibility applies whenever it goes to them. We've got hundreds of properties, including land on which a wind turbine is based. We own at least 2 or 3 bridges. We own land on which a golf club is based. We own a nuclear bunker. We own bin lorries. We own properties for temporary accommodation purposes. And we have a part ownership in one of only 5 water meadows in the country, which we need to look to make sure that that is maintained for future residents for many years to come. In terms of the current property portfolio, though, in terms of the current key activity, what's driving the property team more than anything at the moment is an asset management strategy refresh. It's a piece of work that we started a few months ago and will continue into 2024, and we will share that with you as and when that comes out. The council has fundamentally changed since the last strategy refresh within the property portfolio. Our residents' needs are different. Our aspirations and our ambitions as a council are different, and the new refresh will reflect all of that moving forwards. I mentioned earlier about our streetlights. We've replaced some 1,700 streetlights over the last few years, and will continue to upgrade the remaining 630 or so over the course of next year. We've been acquiring, on behalf of our housing teams, temporary accommodation and other properties. I'm delighted to announce that all 11 of our residential properties that were acquired over the course of the last 12 months or so are now occupied and used by our most needy of residents. We continue to deliver on the Brecon Bridge business plan, and we will talk more about that in a later part of the agenda that is coming up. We've got some challenges at the moment with Colkirk, as anyone will know, but we'll continue to plan and move over that moving forwards. And we've got 2 further schemes in the pipeline, Banham and Litcham, which are critical to our pipeline development. And again, we'll probably refer to those when we talk about our business plan activities for Brecon Bridge later on. Our small sites work stream of activity continues, and I'm sure that members will be asking questions around that. It is slow, it is cumbersome, it is quite emotional, but it is something that we need to do as a council to get land to those people who need it, who deserve it, and hopefully can pay for it. Car parking enforcement, we currently take place in terms of Swaffham and Attleborough, and we've been undertaking a major car parking review for all of our car parks in all of our towns, wherever they might be, to make sure that our car parks and our approach to our car parks are fit for purpose for generations to come within the district. Next slide, please, Teresa. In terms of our procurement part, we operate a consortium with Broadland, South Norfolk, and currently Great Yarmouth councils. We offer procurement services for all of these, and will continue over the next year to offer services to those who remain part of the consortium moving forwards. We've had some challenges with the consortiums because councils' needs in any consortium often differ. And the biggest challenge that we faced this year is the Procurement Act that has fundamentally altered almost every procurement process for any council in the country. At the moment, there are some 300 billion of money spent by public authorities, and the Procurement Act seeks to simplify, make that process more flexible, make it more effective and more transparent. I certainly believe that this works for those suppliers to procurement contracts, particularly small suppliers and startup businesses, but it is posing real challenges for any procurement acquiring councils such as Brecon. We now need to run at least 2 systems, the old system and the new, and most of the secondary legislation, actually, although the Act received royal assent on the 26th of October, most of the secondary legislation that brings the Act into meaning actually hasn't been published yet. But we need to be effective, our systems need to be effective from the 1st of January next year, in other words, 2024. So that's posing some real challenges moving forwards. But at the end of the day, our procurement process is part of what we offer, both internally and externally, to other councils. Next slide, please. On the legal side, we have a very small legal team, and they are engaged in a number of activities, some complex asset sales, including the Nor Life challenges that we've seen, where a lot of the activity was linked to our PFI. In terms of ICO appeals, we have a number of appeals. Our residents are entitled to appeal on a number of occasions, and some of those appeals will take longer than we would like. And I've mentioned already the procurement challenges that we are currently facing, which involve legal inputs all the way through. This does give significant budget pressures on the legal team. It's a small team, it's a dedicated team, but we try to make sure that the team's expertise is spread as widely as it can. And for the future, we will be employing a new planning lawyer. We'll also be making challenges to the legal team as is to make sure they're aware of the commercial implications when a member or an officer says, what's the legal reviews on that? The meter should and is ticking, and we therefore just need to make sure that we're allocating budget responsibility to where it needs to sit. Next slide, please. On the corporate projects side, this is a new area that was established this year. And I'm delighted to say that it is now fully established and resourced, and has been now for a number of months, working collaboratively across the whole of the council. It's not an individual project team, but it's a project expertise that is spread across all areas of the council as part of our wider agile working remit that we introduced as a council a number of years ago. There have already been some nice short-term successes, such as Elm House, the Queen Mother's Garden, which, for those people who aren't aware, has also won a national award, in addition to the Eleanor Fenn Garden a short while ago. And the building, as I mentioned, of new homes and the acquisition of new properties for temporary accommodation of rough sleepers. The team will take the lead on any high priority projects, and there are more than a dozen or so high priority projects that this council is facing at the moment, such as solar panel schemes on some of our key strategic sites. But the team also have been tasked with trying to embed a project management culture wider within this council. For those of you on general purposes might remember, when we established the team was set up with a very specific remit. It needs to pay for itself, ultimately, however we measure those returns. As a council, we undertake a very large number of projects. And each project, whether it be for social purposes, whether it be for commercial investment purposes, needs to wash its face and ensure that the objectives and the outputs of that project are what the intended inputs are required. So that was a very high-level overview of everything that we do. I've got members of the team behind me who can answer any specific questions. In fact, members of the team all around me who can answer any specific questions on the remit. Chair, thank you. Be delighted to take any questions from the Commission.
Lovely. Thank you very much for that, Paul. That's a very detailed list of everything in your portfolio. Thank you very much. Any questions from members, please? Yeah, Councillor Clark.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just a couple of questions. Thank you very much for the comprehensive, very quick run through of the sort of corporate empire. Obviously, you've got your team there, Paul, leading on all those areas, and I'm assuming, therefore, that in each of the different directorates and work streams, they're also those projects are badged in those particular directorates as well, with your sort of oversight there. So that's one issue. If something is a project, or it's badged as a project, can I be assured that every project has a KPI and an impact assessment? So that's one question. The second one, which I know you partly answered already in the full council, which I know the public will be interested in, will be around the car park review, and if you just outline the next steps and when any further details will be actually published and public can see them on the website. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul?
Happy to help answer those questions. So the first one was about all of the projects and whether there's any sort of KPIs and impact assessment, I believe, relating to those. As you can imagine, every single project is different. It's very varied. We've got projects relating to changing some physical spaces around the district, right the way through to changing some of our IT, infrastructure internally in the council. So they're all very, very different. But what the team are striving to do is make sure that every project has right at the start proper scope, proper objectives and proper performance indicators, so we know exactly whether the performance of that project has achieved what it has achieved. And that's part of the reason why we're trying to instill a bit of a project management mindset a bit wider across the council, because we want to get a little bit more sort of like control and a bit more efficiency, and that in turn will lead to more delivery or more outputs for our residents and businesses. So yes, they all have something instilled in them regarding sort of like that impact assessment that they're going to have, or that sort of performance indicators that we can go back and check whether it actually did do that in the first place. And it's something that the team have been working quite hard on. The other question I think was about the parking review, about the outcome of the parking review. Yes, it has specific milestones coming forward. You've probably seen on the forward plan for scrutiny, there is a decision coming forward, probably about April, May time, particularly about what we are going to look to do with our car parks moving forward. We'll look to make sure that we bring some outputs to that, obviously before that sort of key decision, to make sure all members have sort of some input to that.
Okay, thank you, Ralph. Councillor Kyber, please.
Thank you, Chairman. A number of years ago, we spent some time as councillors approving an intellectual property policy. Is that part of your portfolio, and has it been of any use? Thank you.
I mean, in some ways, I'll give you a written answer. The answer is, I mean, it should be. When I've had a look at that policy, I will get back to you, Councillor, and tell you what the implications are. I'm just wondering if anyone behind me has got anything to say. No, but it's an interesting point. Actually, there are certain services that have IP associated with them. There are certain procurements that have certain IP associated with them. I rather cheekily talk about tangible assets, but I also talk about intangible and real assets, of which IP is one of those. And certainly some of our processes, I mean, just thinking on my feet, I really wouldn't mind actually trademarking or getting an IP around them, because we do some very unique things in a very unique way, which I wouldn't mind replicating, but I need to do that with some IP behind it. But I'll get back to you.
Thank you. Any further questions, please? No, just one from myself, Paul. You mentioned car parking review there, and I've noted your answer to Harry. Like I'm sure a number of members, I've been busily going about my Christmas shopping the last few weeks and desperately trying to buy whatever I can from Thetford Town Centre, where I live. 2 points. One, the attraction of having free car parking is a very valid attraction. It's, for people like me, that's a bit chaotic. Not having to rush around getting car parking tickets and going multiple trips is actually quite a key driver for me to go there. But I have noticed over the last few weeks that the car parks have been incredibly busy, but I haven't always noticed the footfall increasing in the town centre. Yeah, blocking of our car parks is a real challenge. So where are we at with getting through the car parking reviews and the sort of, in some cases, I know in Thetford, the idea of time limits for car parking, which actually I think is really important to get that churn in our town centres. And also, to what extent are you able to guarantee that we maintain free car parking moving forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. I'm going to ask the second question first, and I'm going to be quite blunt. I can't guarantee it, because I don't know what the output of the review ultimately will be looking at. What I do know from the early stages of the data that we have collected, and there's a huge amount of data. We've got many tens of car parks, ranging from very small size to very big. Some of them. The evidence that we're seeing at the moment is that on quite a lot of instances, those car parks are being used by residents as opposed to by shoppers, those people who want to come into the town. And I think that's something we need to think about quite carefully as well as quite cautiously. On the one hand, every taxpayer within our district pays in part for the car parks that we provide. Only car users will use them, and in a lot of instances, those car users might be using them in other areas outside of the district, for which, of course, they're paying. And the question we're kind of grappling with at the moment is, car parks free at the point of entry are great as long as they do two things. One is you can get into them, and two, they work for us in terms of encouraging people to come in, to do what they want to do in our fantastic towns, and then, to put it bluntly, to leave so that somebody else can do the same thing. And as you rightly point out, certainly at certain busy times, if I'm coming into a car park and I either can't find a space, or when I leave home, I'm not sure if I can find a space or not. Quite often, our challenge with our towns is I might go to somewhere else, Wyndham, where I will be paying to park, but at least I know that there is a space there. So you rightly point out, these are complex challenges that I'm afraid to say can't have a binary answer. And part of the challenge is that every one of our car parks, every one of our towns is quite unique. In some towns, we've got, I think, more car parking than the current service offering is allowing. In other towns, like Thetford, we've got fewer car parks, but actually in some instances, some of the car parks residents can't find. And it's probably not helped by the fantastic, wonderful one-way system that we see in Thetford. If you miss the car park once, you suddenly find yourself disappearing into Norwich. So there will be, it's a complicated challenge.
Thank you. OK, I'm going to move on to item 8, which is obviously linked. We've got the Breckland Bridge review. We've got a couple of guests with us today, Nigel Robson from the Land Group and Stuart Bisley, the Council's Independent Director for Bridge Group, Breckland Bridge. Thank you very much for coming, folks. Paul, would you like to introduce this item?
Thank you, Chair, again. I'm pleased to present, colleagues, this report to the Scrutiny Commission. I'm aware that Scrutiny added this report to their work programme, and I hope that the report that is provided for you gives enough information about some of the key aspects of the Council involvement in this joint venture. And I use that word joint venture very cautiously. Breckland Bridge is not a controlled entity of Breckland Council. It is a joint venture. We talked earlier on about assets, and assets are things that we control. This is not something that we control. It is something of which we are a partner, which means as a partner, we work together towards a common goal. It's not a traditional contractual relationship, for example, a contractor for delivering services with performance criteria or key performance indicators. We act as a shareholder, and the report will outline how we as shareholders govern that partnership on your behalf. I'm delighted that one of the other shareholders, representatives, a director, as you mentioned earlier on, Nigel Robson, is here to support this item with us. The report will outline, or the report does outline, how we as a shareholder govern the partnership, and you will see that each partner to the Bridge joint venture appoints 3 directors to the board. Ours are a member, Councillor Phil Carron, a senior officer, Mr. Jason Cole, and an independent member, Stuart Bisley. I think Stuart is also here today. Yeah, thank you, Stuart. Sorry, I just couldn't see you behind the people. Stuart is a chartered surveyor, been involved in the Council's appointed independent director since inception. The report also details some of the achievements of the partnership, how projects and activity of the business plan is delivered and approved, the current activity of the partnership, and some information on the risk inherent within the partnership. It is important to note that the 5-year rolling business plan of the partnership is reviewed, refreshed, and approved annually by the shareholders of the partnership, which in our case is Cabinet. Members have seen that report coming forward the last time in July this year. And this provides the opportunity for all members to review the activity of Breckland Bridge and confirm its continued vision and aims. The vision and aims of the partnership in this context are really important to consider. Our vision as Bridge is to achieve financial returns with a view to maximising revenue for shareholders. That is a very specific commercial remit. It is not the remit, by the way, of the asset management part of the council. The council dictates what land should or should not be within the Bridge remit, but that information does need to be disclosed as part of the five-year plan. We are aware that as a council we have a wide variety of property that can be developed for a number of reasons, social, community, as well as commercial ones, to assist our residents and our business. The Bridge partnership looks at one small element of that. It's a balance of outputs and inputs that we need to deliver as a council before we start thinking about the commercial ambitions of Bridge moving forwards. Once land moves into Bridge, we can usefully use any financial returns for the partnership, should we wish to do so, to deliver further aspects of the corporate plan. If I can speak plainly, Chair, and indulge just for a second, a small aspect of the business plan is the small sites work stream, where property, which is mainly small pieces of land, if considered surplus by this council, not by Bridge, can be looked at to be disposed of on either a commercial basis or on a community basis with local parish councils or town councils. This element of the Bridge relationship is often misunderstood and, with respect, at times misrepresented. Land, especially if it's next to you, is emotionally important. The small sites process is controlled by us as a council. We consult, we liaise, we explore, and we determine what the use of that land is. Speaking frankly, we haven't always been absolutely clear with that, which is why for the last 18 months or so, we've published on our website exactly what that process is, what it looks like. It's only after that process has happened that we transfer the land to the remit of Breckland Bridge. And at that point, I would hope everyone in this room, whatever aspiration would say, once land is to be disposed, it should be sold at the maximum commercial value that we can achieve, because that is what benefits everybody within the district. Yeah. So it's important to note that Bridge is only a tool that allows us as a council to deliver any surplus assets within this small sites disposal programme. The challenge, of course, is that we need to publish the Bridge 5-year business plan before that small sites disposal programme takes effect for a particular piece of land. And that's where often some people get confused. A resident, and I've been rung up by residents who have said, I understand that you're selling a piece of land for housing. The answer is no. It's got to go in the business plan for Breckland Bridge, because we need to be transparent and give a 5-year plan for our partner within this joint venture. Harry might recall I had some conversations with some of your older residents when you were having the campaign at the start of the year, and bless them, they were trying to work out where some of the land of the placards they were holding up was. And I was quite helpful with those to say that bit of land is theirs, that bit of land is there. There are land that we own that isn't necessarily going to be disposed of by Bridge, but the small sites disposal programme might end up with the fact that some of those pieces of land might be more suitable for disposal than they are for community use, or they are for other elements or other uses within the district. So thank you, Chair. It's good to get that bit out of the way, but along with officers, Mr. Robson and Mr. Bisley, happy to take questions on the Breckland Bridge report.
Lovely. Thank you very much for that, Paul. And as you say, the Breckland Bridge item was a request for from members of the Commission some time ago for an update. So I'm grateful that you've been able to bring that forward to us today. Any questions from members, please, on the report? I've got Councillor Wickerson first and then Councillor Clark.
Green, okay, no problem. Colkirk, I noticed that in the report of our 4 million current financial exposure, 50% of that is invested in the Colkirk project, which is now on hold, obviously, because of the bankruptcy of the current contractor. Correct me if I'm wrong. Can we have some confirmation that half of that, i.e. the 2 million, I think actually the figure was 1.9 million, wasn't it? Thank you. Is not at risk in any shape, way or form in terms of what is happening at Colkirk at the moment. Thank you.
I will get Ralph to answer that. I cannot confirm in law whether Wellington has actually gone bankrupt, so just be mindful when we print this. I wouldn't want to predetermine that.
Simply, yeah, what we do is we pay for works through the loans as the works are completed. So at the point that we paid for work, at the point that work stopped, we paid for everything up to a certain point. So the value of those works rests with us for the funding that we've actually given. So that asset still sits with us, and those works sit with us for the funding that we've provided to the scheme. So yes, that's secure within the asset that's been sort of like built so far, if that makes sense.
Thank you, David. Harry, please.
Thank you very much. I note your comment in 3.3 in bold about the fact that sites are included doesn't mean that they're ring fenced for meeting the partnership's aim in terms of development, and that's the second stage. And whilst I take what you're saying there as face value, I think there is still work to do both on the website and with the public in actually convincing them of that process and further understanding, because as far as the public are concerned, in a very simple way, they regard that as their piece of land, accepting that Brecon is the legal owner, or they might regard it as being the guardian. The other thing with respect to the rally of around about 75 residents that you attended, some of them were different ages, and the response, so just to correct you there, because I've got the video, is also the range of hundreds of residents across Dereham, speaking as a ward councillor, does represent all ages, rightly or wrongly. Some of those that I've sought to, respond to, and obviously I will emphasise again on behalf of the council the process that you've outlined there. Thank you.
Sorry, if I may, it was good value, just so you know, because in fact it was informative. It was informative. I had a lovely, I can't remember their names, but a lovely conversation with a couple of them who asked to hold up posters. I just thought it was lovely.
Yep, Linda Turner, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to help Harry out as much as anything, so I sit on Shipton Parish Council as well. Parish Council bought a piece of land from Breckland, and we've handed it over to the residents, and they've planted an orchard on it with Councillor Crane's help, and so it's still their land. They still see it as their land, even though the Parish Council now own it. So it's just how it's handled.
Thank you. Do you want to respond? Yeah.
Just kind of picking up on Councillor Turner's point. Sorry, Councillor Gart, you raised two things. I think we all have a responsibility. The challenge of a joint venture where we've got partners, all of whom need to know exactly where they stand, is that Bridge requires a business plan. It's part of our contractual obligation. That business plan, which is a rolling business plan, is over 5 years. The frustration, if I can just say individually, is that business plan will make transparent some things that won't happen. And I think we have to all accept some responsibility of saying into the business plan goes any possible land disposal to make sure that Bridge's resources are adequate and to make sure that our resources are adequate as part of that partnership arrangement. But that plan is looking at for 5 years, and some of the pieces of land that might be included in the plan, because we've got to include everything, might not be considered for 1, 2, 3 years' time. And actually, as part of the consideration process, as a council, we might decide that that land is best transferred to a community group or all the other things. So, Harry, you are right. I think we do need to manage our PR better in some ways, because a lot of the information within the business plan actually might not actually come to fruition. But I think then there are responsibilities for all of us as members, whichever side, whichever our political view is, to make sure that if a resident picks up, I don't know, a local newspaper picks up the fact that there is some land that's coming up in the business plan, it's not all bad. The business plan is the business plan to give transparency for Breckland Bridge.
Thank you. Any further members who've not yet spoken? No? David, second question.
In that 5-year business plan that Breckland Bridge has, is there a paragraph or any indication that of the time frame for Breckland Bridge to actually make a profit, having over the last 2 years made a loss in 2022 of 57,000 and up to March 23 a loss of 29,000. So in the business plan, is there a part of that which says it's going to take us 3 years, 4 years before we can actually show a profit? Thank you.
I can try and help answer that one. Yes, I mean, the business plan includes a budget, it includes the projection of the schemes, and it includes a projection of the forecast of the potential income. As you can imagine, it's a property development company, so the income and expenditure is quite lumpy. And you'll see, obviously, a company like that will make a loss because there's a lot of expenditure coming out, and then you'll have a lot of income coming in when houses are sold, which is predominantly the purpose of the arrangement, which is currently in the business plan, is the schemes to look to build houses on council-owned land. So currently, as the business plan is set up, you will see that in the business plan. Perfectly understandable that would happen as sort of a property development company in that way. So you would see that forecast, and when we bring the business plan forward again, which we will do, like we do as Paul said, you'll see that in the business plan again when we bring it forward this coming year.
Thank you, Ralph. I'm going to ask a question of Nigel and Stuart, if I may, because we don't often get the opportunity to have you guys along, so I don't want you to miss out. I'll start with yourself, Nigel. Obviously, you come at it from a land group perspective, and we're engaged in this partnership because of skills and expertise that you bring. I just wondered if you could outline, please, what benefit you feel Land Group has brought to the partnership.
Thank you for the opportunity, and nice to meet you all today. I think from our perspective, we see our key value in providing expertise and to a certain extent challenging the council in what it wants to do with its land. And I would emphasise it's very much a partnership, it's very much a two-way process. Some of the sites, I wouldn't say it's blindingly obvious, but it's fairly obvious which way we need to go. There are others which we have contributed in discussions with Ralph and his team over the years in terms of such things as car parks, which you've talked about today, and some other sites around the district, where Ralph has sought our views, we have given our views. They haven't necessarily been perhaps as the council wanted to hear, but they've gone in anyway, and the council has then taken its decisions and moved on. So I think that's really where our prime value comes in.
Lovely, thank you very much. And Stuart, your role as the independent director in many ways is about representing Breckland Council. How do you ensure that we get best value from these opportunities, and what do you regard as best value?
Thank you, Chairman. So my role as the independent director, I suppose, is in some ways to do what you do in terms of, scrutinise Land Group on behalf of the council. I mean, I'm a property developer or a chartered surveyor first and foremost, but I have extensive property development experience. So I'm the property expert that sits on the board along with your two other appointed directors. So I can give the council, or the rest of the board, and those my fellow Breckland appointed directors, that Land Group are going in the right direction or not, as the case may be. Pleased to say, in the vast majority of the time, we're going in the right direction. In terms of, from the benefit from the second part of your question, it's a difficult one because actually, first and foremost, I'm a director of Breckland Bridge, and therefore my duty is to Breckland Bridge as a director. And that sometimes does cause a challenge when you have to have regard to your shareholders' interests too. And it is walking a tightrope, in the same way that the Land Group also have that challenge. And there have been many a meeting when we've discussed as directors what's in the best interest of the company, at the same time what's in the best interest of our shareholders. I'm pleased to say thus far we've found a way forward, because ultimately we have an approved business plan, and that's what we have to work to. And first and foremost is to seek to deliver a commercial return for the company on behalf of the benefit of the shareholders.
Lovely. Thank you very much. That's very useful. Okay, I see nobody else indicating, so I'm going to move on. The next item today is item number 9, which is the Barn and Broom Golf and Country Club. Just to point out to members, I'm very keen as chair that we have as much of the debate above the line as possible, which is why you'll see an above the line item and a below the line item. I would ask for members' assistance in only asking questions or giving comments related to the public papers in the above the line section, please. If you wish to ask anything in the below the line papers, you have the opportunity to do that when we go below the line. But as far as we possibly can, I'd like for the debate to be in public with your assistance, please. So I'm going to invite Paul to introduce this item, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to be here today to present this report to the Scrutiny Commission to enable members to review the decision that Cabinet intends to take this afternoon. Being here also gives a wider number of members the ability to be part of that decision. As you will see from the report in front of you, the report is going to ask Cabinet to reconfirm the strategy to dispose of the property asset, Barn and Broom. It's a reconfirmation of the intended strategy to dispose of this property following the previous decisions made in November 2022. The decision is coming to Cabinet Committee again because I recognise that it is a significant decision and needs to be made as transparently as it can be, and there is also now a need to confirm the intended sale price for the asset. The sale price, unfortunately, and other elements relating to the background of this, mainly the commercials, need to remain confidential, and hence that is why part of this report is exempt. We need to respect our position of the tenant to ensure that some information remains confidential, as like many of our tenants in our property portfolio, the tenant is running a commercial business. The previous decision in 2022 confirmed the strategy to dispose of the council's freehold interest in this property following receipt of an unsolicited offer in the market. To enable that offer to be considered, the current contracted lease has a requirement whereby the property needs to be offered first to the tenant. This is standard in all sale and leaseback arrangements. As per the report in front of you, that process required an expert determination of the price, the difference between what we want and what the tenant wants to buy. And we've now reached a position where members have a decision about whether to continue that process and make the offer to the tenant at the price determined by that expert. And that is the decision that's being sought this afternoon at Cabinet. As was reported in December 2022, this investment property has served its purpose. It has performed well and has yielded a good return. When all expenditure and income is calculated, we expect to have made a surplus on this investment, and a surplus in excess of what we would have achieved had we have deposited the monies relating to this investment into cash for cash returns. It is that surplus that has allowed us to provide much needed support in terms of services for our residents and our businesses. It is right to continue the strategy to dispose of this asset now, because we now have higher interest rates as those are competitive, that are almost as competitive as the property yield, and are certainly more liquid right now. I do not know what interest rates might be looking at in the future, but right now they're higher and more liquid. We also need to consider that investing in property for a yield is, by definition, risky. like any yield-enhancing asset, such as a bond or some utility shares. This property represents a significant proportion of our commercial property portfolio. As such, it provides concentration risk, and as such, I believe now is the right time to dispose of it, as spreading our risk is a very prudent strategy at a time where we must think more carefully than ever about our budget position, our ability to continue to provide much needed support to our residents and services, and the changing nature of this council moving forward. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take, with my office colleagues, any questions in relation to this item in front of you.
Thank you very much. Questions from members, please. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm cognizant of the Chairman's remarks in making sure that any questions are not framed in anything which might be below the line respecting commercial confidentiality, which I've done throughout the process as a councillor throughout. I'm also one of the councillors here that actually called this into scrutiny in the past, so I'm fully aware of the different permutations and discussions that have happened. I wasn't here in 2006 when the council acquired the asset, which wasn't then known to the councillors until they'd actually voted for it, but we'll move on from that. I will probably have some questions if we move to part two. Obviously, if the Chairman or you yourself, Paul, consider that there is a answer which can really only be given below the line, I'll take that as a sort of rap on the knuckles. Without being sort of flippant, but I know some people, there have been headlines around golf, and one which was put to me was, will Breckland Council lose their handicap after crazy golf round finishes? Well, I'm actually not very good at golf, and I prefer to do the full thing. In terms of questions, and some of these are things which I think any member of the public might be asking. I did actually have originally 12 questions for each day of Christmas, but I'm not going to take up the time, bearing in mind the Chairman's warning, as you'll be pleased to hear. In the report, it stated there's been a yield of 3.9%, which obviously seems, pretty reasonable. So obviously, it'd be helpful to have anything above the line in terms of why we're now seeking to move on. If there is a capital gain from the sale of the asset, where that might be going and how that might be used. The other side, if there was, regrettably, if the Cabinet goes later on today for the option of going ahead with the sale, if there was by any chance a capital loss on the flip side against the original investment, including fees, etc., when would that be declared? Also, the report to the OSC and the Cabinet in the public part of the papers mentions that the purchase price was 7 million plus costs. So I'm assuming that the total value over and above the 7 billion is more than that, and whether there is any further investment above that. If there is a revenue loss if it's disposed, because obviously it's on a lease and chair back, because obviously we won't be having the revenue coming in if we sell it, where will that shortfall be made up? But only a couple more questions. In the event of a sale, thinking also about not just small sites, but this is a very big site, will the council be able to take advantage or use what's called an overage agreement? So if we sell the site to whoever, what will prevent someone developing that for housing and us not being able to get any return or leverage from that? I noticed you mentioned that the asset is taking up 34% of the footprint, but whether you can also answer this below the line, or happy to have it in writing, what that proportion is in terms of our commercial investment. So you've done it with a physical the physical footprint of being 34%. And lastly, a couple of points were, from this particular exercise, it's obviously been a very specialist type of investment. Knowing what you know now, what might you do differently? And going forward, there have been thoughts around less problematic or less speculative investments, such as the local government CCLA scheme, where you might have those in the portfolio. We know we've got investments in a number of places which have all been discussed thoroughly at the Governance and Audit Committee. So, for example, you had investment in, say, local authority stocks, you don't then have to worry about things like tenant vacancies, business fluctuations, tenant occupancies, COVID downturn, physical deterioration of assets, and there wouldn't be any question of involvement of lawyers and sort of, if you like, these aspects of the property officers. So there's a number of questions there I appreciate, and I'll stop there. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
You win a prize, Ralph, if you can work out which questions require an answer.
I'll just while Ralph is still trying to get all the questions down, Harry, I can answer some things. One, our asset strategy is for a portfolio of assets rather than an individual asset, and so invariably when we're dealing with portfolios, and I can talk, we manage those portfolios to give an overall return that actually we're quite pleased about over the course of this year, and that return across the portfolio is very strong indeed. And because some people in this room will know that overall return, what I can't tell you is how much of an individual return this individual asset will give, simply because you'll be able to determine what the numbers are. If you were to ask me, would I make the investment again? We've got to think back. This is 2006. The world was a fundamentally different place. This council was a fundamentally different place. This was pre-financial crisis, pre-COVID, pre-the Olympics, pre-basically everything. The world has fundamentally changed. My personal view is I would look at it very closely, but I don't like concentration risk. We know very clear if we put a lot of our investment into a single asset, no matter how good those returns are, it takes up a huge amount of management time and effort, and we are exposed to the underlying performance of the underlying asset. What I can do is just clarify a couple of things. We have never, and this might be news to some local newspapers, we've never owned a golf club. We're not allowed to own a golf club. What we do is we own the land and the property out of which a golf club operates. We were never going to sell, because this was in the public knowledge, the asset at any time whatsoever for £2 million. And I can say that because the number's been out in the newspapers. It's one of the real challenges on a previous plan disposals, when we're talking about capital budgeted receipts, which look 1 year out, we're disclosing only a part of a story which was never the full intended sales price, and what was relating to one small part of an overall. And then the third thing, and you start raising some questions, we can explore this afterwards. Accounting standards, and what you're talking about is accounting, struggle when you've got a piecemeal acquisition with a part disposal of an investment, not a property. IAS 16, which are the rules that we follow as a council, which I'm sure you're fully conversant with because you're raising the question about capital. IAS 16 is an internal accounting standard that reports how certain numbers need to be allocated. IAS 40, which is on investment properties, uses something called fair value accounting, which we as a council cannot run. And I'm just aware that Ali is behind me, who hopefully is nodding at the moment. That's not the way that we choose to report these things. And one of the problems about accounting is it's not a good measure of performance. Accounting allocates costs and revenues to certain accounting periods, and we struggle when we account for quite complex transactions such as this. If you were to ask me, would I make an investment where the output of the investment was more than our total inputs? I would say absolutely, because that's what we should do for the benefit of our residents.
Well, I've had a question I didn't fully understand and an answer I fully didn't understand, but I think I get the general gist. Harry, you briefly want to come back with a supplementary, yes?
Yeah, Chair, thank you very much. It might shock you, Terry. Yeah, thank you very much for that that answer. I said the reason I was focusing partly on the answer was that in the media, the leader has then referred to, if you like, the benefit of holding this particular investment vehicle and focus on that rather than our overall portfolio, which is one of the reasons why I'm drilling down a little bit further in the public part of this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Ralph, do you want to add anything to that?
I think I've got about 6 residual questions that have been answered, so I'll go through them quite quickly, but I think one of them, Harry, is below the line, which was the £7 million plus cost question. So that's the only one I think is below the line, but I think we can probably try and take all the other ones above the line. So you asked if there's a capital gain, how will that be used? Like any receipts, capital receipts that we get from disposal of assets, they're obviously used, they're not ring-fenced for any particular purpose. They're used to go into the capital programme and used to support expenditure in the capital programme. And as you know, that capital programme gets approved every year when we review the budgets and we set the budget. So that comes as part of, setting the capital programme. So the receipts go into to support that. Revenue loss, you asked where. So actually, because we already had a decision in place already to dispose of the asset, the budget's already, our revenue budget's already assumed the sale of the property. So that 200, that sort of rental income has already been taken into account and already removed in anticipation of that, because obviously you have to make plans for decisions that have already been made. So that's already been dealt with. The question around the overage arrangement, in this particular scenario, if we continue in the current with the preemption and offer it to the tenant as per the decision, there would be no overage arrangement in place. It's a standard commercial property conditions of sale, and it would just go across as a sort of standard asset disposal. So there wouldn't be any in that particular transaction. If it jumped into something else, that may be. You asked about the proportion of the size of the asset, and obviously in the report it says about the size, the physical size of the asset. In terms of income, ongoing revenue income, it's about sort of 10% roughly of the total rent roll for the commercial properties portfolio. The one that I think we can still answer possibly is the capital loss question about where that's declared. I think you asked that question. I'm just going to ask Alison whether she can probably help me with that particular one. That's all.
Yeah, thank you. So any capital gains or losses on all of our assets are shown in the statement of accounts every year, which would come through Governance and Audit Committee.
Okay, thank you. I've got Linda Turner next, please. Linda.
Thank you, Chairman. I have one very simple question, which if I was a resident or acting on behalf of my residents, I would ask, which is, have we made money on this?
And I can give a simple answer, yes. Yeah, we have made money. The costs of holding and selling the asset are more than the cost of acquiring the asset. However we define cost in that instance. And then the second question is, we have made more money, to use very blunt language, than what we would have done if we'd taken our acquisition costs and put them in the bank. We've made substantially more money than that.
Thank you. Any further questions, please? Yeah, Councillor Attwell.
Chairman, I have 2 questions. Can I ask the first and get an answer to that from Councillor Hewitt? So, or that might be the lawyer in the room might want to answer this one.
If he glares, you'll know. Yeah.
Could I refer you to item 1.7 on page 29? I think Councillor Clark has already alluded to it. Can you explain to me, it says in there 7 million plus costs, but those costs are all capitalised, and those costs are considerably more added together than the 7 million figure. They would have already been declared through our accounts in previous years. why can we not declare here and now in the public forum what the total capitalised outlay was for this asset?
I think, and I can't see Mike in the room actually.
Behind you.
I'm here behind.
It's Panto season.
He's right behind me. At least one of those elements relates to a subsequent part of the transaction. It was contingent acquisition, and as such, from my perspective, it would be commercially confidential in terms of what happened afterwards, and we can talk about that. I think in terms of the land transaction, which are the numbers here, the Land Register will report the acquisition cost of 7 million, which is why we're showing it.
Okay, second question.
Yeah, okay. Second question is, it was reported in the press yesterday that we have lost capital on any projected sale of this asset, and that loss of capital is substantial. Am I right in saying that because we've lost that capital, we therefore don't have that money to invest in the future? So whatever money you think you've made in revenue on this asset in years to date, in future years, because you no longer have that capital, you are unable to invest that, whether that be through our investment portfolio and realise a return on that, or invest capital you no longer have in much needed projects like housing, leisure, disabled facilities grants, etc.
If I can, and let's give an answer that is definitely above the line. Yeah. I can answer the question in open forum, but by asking a very simple exercise. Barnum Boom was acquired as a yield-enhancing asset. That's what we bought it for. We needed revenue. This council is short of revenue to provide services, and we will use capital to acquire those services. So think about this as an investment. And if I can just ask a couple, if we buy an asset for 7 and sell it for 8, has that been a good investment? My guess is yes. We got more from selling it. If we buy an asset for 7 and sell half of it for 4, has that been a good investment? You're going to need to do, I know your business. Now, hang on just a second. It's going to get a bit more complicated. If you buy an asset for 7 and sell it for 6, has that been a good investment? Now, you would argue, if I understand you right, you would argue, no, it's not been a good investment. But if over the period of time we generated, I'm trying to keep numbers really quite straightforward, 3 on the asset acquisition of 7, actually it has been a good investment. The problem that you're grappling with, if I can say, is that accounting is not a measure of performance. Investments are asking the question, do we generate more from doing something than if we don't do it?
Roger.
With respect, that didn't answer my question at all. Let's assume this figure, let's just say we know the figure's different, but the 7 million you've got here in item 1.7 of this report. If you'd never bought Barnum Broom and you had invested that money in our investment portfolio, you would have got a return on that investment. Agreed, interest rates were lower at the time, but you would have got some return on that investment. But sitting here now, you would still have £7 million that you could invest going forward. Now the interest rates are higher. If you sell this property and, as reported in the press, we are losing capital money, we don't have that to invest going forward. So my take on this is, you may say that the thing has performed well up to a point in time, but going forward, what you've effectively done is sold the family silver that we can no longer use to leverage anything in the future. Would that be a fair assessment?
Let me try and answer that if I can. The only way I can really sort of simply answer that really is that obviously we invested cash into an asset and we turned cash into a property asset. If we now liquidate out of that, that property becomes cash, whatever that figure may be. That is the outcome of obviously what the change in the market has done to that property investment over a period of time. So if that cash out is different to what the cash in is, that's the sum that you can take forward and use to invest in other investments, if you so wish, whatever you get out of the asset at the end from the disposal.
You still haven't answered my question. If you no longer have, if I've got an asset, for instance, that's worth £10 million, if I had £10 million in the bank, okay, that we wanted to invest in our investment portfolio since 2006, this council would have got some return on it. Agreed, I agree with Councillor Hewitt, we wouldn't have realised the same return that we've got probably on the revenue that we've received on the asset. But the fact is that we've got to the end of this period, you no longer have the asset, in effect. You no longer have my figure of 10 million, you've got a much less figure. So therefore, you've got less to invest going forward. That's to me, is simple mathematics. You just don't have it because you've got rid of, you haven't realised the capital. And to be fair, you know, I think they're public documents. I'm looking at the minutes from 11th of May 2006 and the 4th of September 2012. Lots of promises were made in those meetings about everything that was going to be achieved on this asset. And every time I've read minutes about this, it's been nowhere near achieved what's been promised. It's been much over-promise and under-delivery, and a lot of hassle and heartache along the way. I still think there's a problem that really does need to be thought about with regard to the capital aspect of this investment. We no longer have, or if this sale goes through, we no longer have the capital that we had in 2006. That's the issue.
And if I can come back and say, using your premise, you're right. But what you that no, but with respect, if we hadn't had revenue, we could not have provided the services that we provide for our residents. If you want to just think in binary terms rather than thinking of an asset as a whole, the purpose of the asset is to produce revenue. We can convert capital to revenue. We cannot convert revenue back to capital. So the purpose of the asset is to enable us to generate the revenue that we need to provide the goods and services. You are absolutely right. If we buy something for 6 and we sell it for, make up a number, 3, we've lost 3 of capital. My response to you is, during the period of ownership, we would not have been able to provide the services that we value, the services that our residents value, and the services that we really want to provide on behalf of our residents. If you just isolate an investment decision just looking at one aspect of it, and we'd be very respectful, you miss the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is that by generating revenue from this asset, we can and have provided services for our residents.
Thank you. I have got some other speakers now, Roger, so I'm going to move on to them, and then if there's time, I'll come back to you. I've got Councillor Kybird next, please.
Thank you, Chairman. In 2006, I was a councillor, and I do recall that at that time, there was a threat that central government would confiscate district councils' cash reserves. So if we'd kept the money, we might have lost it. That's a long time ago, and politics, as has been said, changes quite a lot. But the essence of today's discussion is to confirm whether or not now is a good time to sell. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Wilkinson, please.
Thank you, Chairman. What I've heard is that if we sell this asset, all of a sudden services we provide as a council to our residents will be lost. As we heard earlier, this asset is a part of the whole portfolio asset, and that is not going to alter. That capital is still going to come for providing services for our residents. I can't see, nobody suggested any services will be cut. We actually, as a district council, we do provide services which we're not statutory forced to do, but we do, and we look after our residents. And the invest capital, what we would raise from this sale, I would say, would at this moment in time would be better invested in other businesses to bring the capital forward to keep it coming. 3.9%. If that was my business, I'd have sold it years ago. 3.9%. You cannot run a business at 3.9% profit. If that's what we're getting, the cost of administrating that income and from rental and everything else like that. That's why your national companies have gone to the wall. They've not, your Wilcos, they've not made the profit to be able to run and keep the business running and pay staff and everything else. So this seems now the right time to dispose of this, in my opinion.
Yep. Just one quick thing. 3.9% doesn't feel like a particularly good yield at the moment. Don't forget, for about 15 out of the years that we've owned it, base rates were running at 0.5 to 1%, and yields on AAA rated bonds, AA rated bonds, which is almost the only other thing we can invest in, was generating only a couple of basis points above that.
Yes. Any further questions? No, I've got a couple from myself before I come back to you, Roger. I wasn't here in 2006, and I went back and read the papers as Roger did from that meeting. I was quite shocked to read the papers from 2012, because not only was I a councillor, but I was in the room when the discussion took place, and I'd entirely forgotten the conversation that we had. There is a world of difference between what the original intention was back in 2006 and what the expected benefits would be and what's actually been achieved, which made me quite frustrated, frankly, looking back at what it was supposed to be and what it's turned out to be. And it made me think about the previous agenda item and about Breckland Bridge and how we have engaged with an external partner because of skills and expertise. And it made me wonder, Paul, if we've had sufficient skills and expertise in-house over those years since 2006 to handle an investment of this size and nature. It is expensive, it is risky. Do we as a council have the necessary professional expertise in-house to manage an asset like this?
It certainly requires a very unique skill set. We've got some fantastic officers in our teams at the moment, and we heard some of them speaking last week about some of the challenges of commercial assets and thinking as a commercial landlord. If you were to say, has that always been the case, I couldn't comment. I was here in 2006 as a very junior member. I wasn't here in 2012. And so we're all kind of thinking imperfectly. The one thing I can say is that decisions are made based on the best information available at the time, and we can look back through a rose-tinted view with hindsight and say, well, I would have never done that. The frustration is that nobody makes a bad decision intentionally. We all try to make good decisions. I'm not suggesting this was a bad decision. Would we make it again? I think we would look more cautiously at it because the numbers look lovely, but the concentration risk is the risk that really, I think, we've moved on. As a council, our range of services that we offer, particularly for vulnerable people, are so different to what they were in 2006-07. I think our priorities have changed. Our desire to help our residents has changed. And I think from that perspective, within the mix, therefore, our investment criteria has fundamentally changed. I still think there is scope for focusing on a hard-edged commercial return, but we've widened our asset remit considerably over the last few years, especially during and following COVID.
Okay, thank you. Second point, I think Councillor Khyber mentioned it. The most pertinent question at this moment in time, is it right to sell it now? And more specifically, is it right to sell it under the terms as presented? And I suspect that will be the below the line discussion. I've had residents contact me asking the value for money question. Have we made money, as Linda alluded to? And I appreciate that at this moment in time, it's very difficult to answer that because we haven't completed the process. That will come once the sale happens, and until we get there, we can't say with certainty what that price will be until it's all signed and delivered. But I do think it is important that the council is very open and honest and transparent about this, because it is significant sums of money. There is significant public interest. So when we get to the point that it is complete, will you commit to publishing all of the information related to costs, capital and revenue in a public arena?
And I don't know whether you want to pick up. So to the best of my knowledge and belief, I would love to. Because actually one of my biggest frustrations over the last few years is the degree of misinformation and disinformation. Sometimes, I'll be blunt, deliberately, that's been put out. But, you know, when you start reading even in the private eye about some of the things that we haven't done, I've had residents, and actually I've suffered quite a lot of physical and verbal abuse about why on earth are you selling this for so little? And the answer is we're not. The problem is I can't talk about in terms of what we are. Our legal requirement under Section 123 of the Local Government Act 1972 is to get the best consideration that can be reasonably obtained. We apply a value for money element separate to our legal requirements. You know, would I like more for this asset? Of course I would. Would I like to sell it more? Of course I would. Is this the best consideration that can be reasonably obtained in the light of an unsolicited offer that comes in and a preemption clause that was put into a contract 15 years ago when many of us were not in the room? The answer is yes, it is. If we were to ask, and it's also, I think it's almost at the heart of Councillor Atterwell's question. So it's possible to have the best consideration that reasonably obtained. It's possible to report some numbers and still create value for money as an investment. And it's frustrating. The accounting is confusing. The asset is confusing. And a lot of the information out in the public domain is confusing. And I would love nothing more to say, here's exactly what we've done. We can't do that yet, obviously, because the preemption process, the sales process is still taking place.
No, I'm very reassured to hear that, because I think it's an issue about public trust in Breckland Council. And I think the sooner you're able to clarify some of that, the better. The last point I would make is, at some point, hopefully, we will get a sum of money come into the council. And it made me think about, is it right that we are investing in assets of this size? You know, our job as councillors, as a council, is to provide public services. And is it right that we're engaging in, high-risk strategy in many regards we're quantifying that risk, we're mitigating that risk, but ultimately it is risky. Is it right that we're needing to do that to provide services? It's just a sort of principal issue for me. I hope that we have a conversation here at this council when that capital asset is realised about what we do with the money, is the point I'm making, because I've got concerns about councils, and we've seen it all around the country. I personally think council services should be properly funded, and we shouldn't be having to engage in these high-risk strategies. But I hope Breckland takes this as an opportunity to engage members in that conversation.
And I would certainly agree, absolutely, that councils need more money. And until we get more money, or until somebody realises that we need more money, I come back almost to our original remit right at the start of the day and earlier section. My role, my team, the wider team's role, is to try to exploit as much value as we can from the money that we've got, knowing that's all we've got. And that does involve sometimes making some hard decisions. It does involve sometimes saying, I will sell this asset now because there are better opportunities in the future. Yeah. It does involve sometimes saying, I'll sell this asset for cash as opposed to giving it away. And they are, as you rightly say, complex. The issue overall is if we can manage a portfolio of assets where no one asset skews the whole portfolio, which is another answer to your question, which my preference is that they don't, I think that way we can manage with less commercial and certainly concentration risk moving forward.
Brilliant, thank you. I am concerned that the amount of time we as a council have spent on this one issue since 2006, the whole time we're not talking about services to the public. That's my concern. Roger, did you want to come back with any final points before we move on?
Just follow up on your last point, Chairman, about what we do with any money that we realise from the sale. Can you confirm if that is money that we can use, or have we already spent that money by effectively using internal borrowing on our accounting processes to pay for stuff that we've already done or got in the pipeline? So will that be money that we can use, or is it money that's already been allocated? And finally, I just want to come up on your other point about have we had the sufficient expertise in-house to do that? I just want to say, as a leader of one of the opposition groups, I've got a lot of faith in Ralph, and I'd like to pay tribute to Ralph because I know from the many briefings that I've had in the last few years just how hard he's worked to try and wrestle with this conundrum. It's been a real problem, Barnum Broom, which I think he's inherited from his predecessors, and I just want to say I think he's done the very best that he can on behalf of the council to try and get us, to a point whether we will disagree, and I'm sure I'll come on to Councillor Hewitt's bigger picture argument in the closed session. I look forward to that after I've had a stiff coffee, but I just want to say I pay tribute to Ralph and the team who have worked really hard to try and get us to a place where we can do the best we can with what he's inherited, and he's been very frank, very open with the information for me, and I know yourself, Terry, when you lead the opposition, and Councillor Clark, and I just want to thank him for that. I think that point should be made. Yeah, if you could answer my question about have we spent the money already, or is it new money we'll be able to use, I'd be grateful.
I'll pass to Ali.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. As Ralph mentioned earlier, we manage our capital as an overall. Nothing's ring-fenced individually. So we already have a decision back from November 2022, and therefore that capital receipt already budgeted is within the pot already. So in theory, it is already allocated to existing capital spend.
Thank you. Yeah, just to follow on your first point or your second point there, Roger, I haven't been privy to a briefing recently, but I have over many years, and I'm very grateful to Ralph and Zoe, and actually to Paul yourself, always been very forthcoming with information, so very grateful. I don't see anybody else indicating. As I say, I think we'll debate the detail of the proposal below the line. I am keen, folks, that we've had a good debate about this, but nobody at this point has suggested we make any recommendation or make any opinion known. I know there's several members of Cabinet, indeed the leaders in the room. I'm sure they would be keen to know the views of the Commission when they debate this afternoon. So I'd suggest that we have the debate below the line and then come back into public session if you want to make any formal decision as such. But for now, I'm going to carry on with the agenda. What's the time? Could I have an indication whether you'd like a comfort break? Yes. OK, we will pause for 5 minutes. If you could be back here by 11:30, I'll be grateful. Thank you. Right, ready? We're going to carry on, folks. We've got a few more agenda items to get through. We're going to get back into it with item 10, the housing allocations policy. We had a really good discussion last month about housing generally. Good sort of practice, I think, for the housing allocations policy. I'm going to invite Councillor Claire Bowers, Cabinet Member for Housing, to introduce the report, please. Claire.
Thank you, Chairman. So to introduce the Housing Allocations Policy Review Report to the Commission, the revised Housing Allocations Policy will go to Cabinet and full Council in February for adoption. And this month we have a period of consultation with partner landlords, other partners and the public, and members of the Commission are asked to consider the proposed changes to the policy to inform the final draft at this meeting this morning. Attached to the agenda is the draft report, a copy of the proposed allocations policy, a table that shows what the feedback so far has been against specific policy points and where changes are being made with the reasoning, and also the questions that were considered in the consultation workshops and with partners. The report itself highlights the proposed changes that could be considered as controversial or that will have the biggest impact on applicants, rather than the minor and more procedural ones, and the Commission's views would be appreciated. Jill is present to take members through the proposed changes and reasoning if required, and to answer members' questions on the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Jill, could I just ask you to highlight the workshops? So I think they were very well attended, and contributions, just an overview of how they went, and a sort of introduction to the key changes from your point of view. I think that'd be really useful for the Commission.
Yeah, so the review and the consultation on this started over the summer. As I've put in the report, we did desktop research, we consulted with our neighbouring districts and looked at policies further afield as well. But the most important thing that we've done to date really was the 4 workshops that we held. All members were invited to those workshops. They were well attended by not just members but also our partner housing associations, shelter, and other charities that we work with. So those that support our vulnerable residents also came. I think it's fair to say that the outcome of each workshop was completely different to the other workshops. Everyone, as you go through discussions, everyone had different thoughts, different opinions, and people even changed their mind during the workshops as different information was thought about. So the report that I brought today highlights kind of the main changes that where you would see some impact on those who can apply to the register and the kind of priority that they'll be given. So I can take you through those, and if that's okay.
Yes, please.
And if people can then give me any thoughts and feedback on those. Okay. So the first one is what I've called date in band, and that is about people who are living in supported housing in Breckland and sometimes outside of Breckland, where we've placed them there. Supported housing is much needed resource for people who can't quite manage their own tenancies or have failed in previous tenancies and need a period of time to kind of address the issues that have maybe caused them to not be able to manage them. And we really need that resource in Breckland because we have so many people, unfortunately, that do come to us that can't quite manage their own tenancy. When people are ready to move on from there, the supported housing providers contact us. They let us know that they're ready, everything that they've been through. They're at a point where they shouldn't have any rent arrears, and that they understand what having a tenancy means. At the moment, they are gold band on our housing register, which is the second highest band, but they're still struggling to move on from those supported housing provisions because of the lack of one-bedroom housing that we have. This has a detrimental effect on them if they can be waiting a year or more in that position when they've worked so hard, and sometimes they can then regress, and that does impact on the other residents as well. And the other impact of that is that those spaces are not being freed up for people that are in our temporary accommodation that need to go into supported housing. So this was one of the ones that was discussed quite a lot in the workshops with different proposals, but the one that was favoured the most was that when people apply to us at this point, that we backdate the date of their application by 6 months. So that gives them, they're not going into a higher band, they're not going into emergency, but that gives them some priority over other people in the same band. So that's the first proposal. Does anyone have anything they'd like to comment on that one?
No. I'm taking the lack of hands as we support that one.
Okay, I'm taking that as well. Okay, so the next one is probably one of the biggest changes, and it's looking at us putting in non-qualification criteria for the housing register. So at the moment, anyone who meets our local connection criteria can apply to us, even if they don't have a housing need, and even if they've got the means to find an alternative solution themselves. And in the past, most councils did this. They had an open register because they had more properties available. But we've come to the point now where we don't have enough for everyone who applies to us, and it does take a lot of time to assess those applications. And it also means that people who are applying to us out what we call a housing need think that they've got that as a security blanket, when in fact it's not a security blanket for them. So we're proposing non-qualification for people who are adequately housed. So that means people who are not in the bands of emergency gold or silver, which are the bands for those that have a housing need. This is in line with many other district councils now doing the same thing. We're also suggesting that people who own a property that is safe and suitable for them to live in, even if that's in another country, are not able to apply. Of course, as with every application, we will look at the circumstances around that. There are some times, especially in a domestic abuse situation, where someone cannot continue to live there. So every case is done on an individual basis. The next one we're considering is people who've got their own financial resources and are able to apply to the register. And that will be done and updated on an annual basis. There's an appendix that will say what they are. So it's about the income that they've got coming in, but also anything that they've got in savings. So that will be reviewed dependent on the average cost of renting privately and on income levels. So those are the ones under 3.3 for introducing non-qualification. Does anyone have anything they'd like to?
Peter, please.
I think Jill's really answered the question, really, because I think some issues we've had where we say families have been living with their parents and things in one room, 2 kids, 1 person, 2 people, 4 people in one room, that sort of thing. So they obviously are not going to be caught in that trap that they've got a roof over their head, if you like, you know. And the other, what was the other question I had? I've forgotten, never mind. I'd just like to take this opportunity to say as well that our housing team do go above and beyond, even before this project being put into black and white, if you like. Recently I've had 2 cases and they've just gone above and beyond and delivered on every aspect and beyond.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, I appreciate that. You'll probably think of the other thing as I go along as well. Okay, is there anything else anyone wants to say on that one? No, okay. So the next one is connection to the local area. At the moment, anyone who has family living in Breckland can apply if the family have lived here for 3 or more years. What we're proposing is that connection only is relevant if they have a need to move to Breckland to either give support or receive support. So it's not just that someone lives here, but there's a need to move. Has anyone got any thoughts on that?
There is a supporting paper explaining some of these terms in more detail, but just for my own benefit, family connection, distant cousin? So we do define in some ways what it is, but we do also say it's about a meaningful family relationship. So if someone can show that that they're in touch regularly, they're supporting each other, then we'd consider that. I think that's important to clarify. Peter.
Thank you, Chairman. And Jill, yeah, I've just thought my other one on 3.3, the financial investigation. How far can you go on that? Because there has been some discrepancies highlighted to me where allegedly somebody's living in a social house and really could afford to buy their own, or you know, but I don't know how far you're allowed to investigate and
well, in order to come onto the register, we do ask for bank statements over the last 3 months, and then we update those annually as well. And that's savings and current accounts. With existing social housing tenants, if they don't apply to us, we don't look into their finances at all. But if they did and they had a need to move, we would consider whether they had the financial means to go somewhere else.
Thank you. I've got back there.
Thank you, Chairman. And hello. 3.4. I just wondered, and I ought to know this, but I don't. Is there a difference between rural and urban in this particular category? Because this is the one area that I do get challenged at as a rural member.
I'm not sure what you mean, Gordon. Do you mean moving from a need to move from an urban area to a rural?
No, a need to move close to relatives.
Sorry, I'm being really thick. I'm not sure.
What's local?
All right, what do we consider local? Okay, so do we say if they need to move, this is about people who don't live in Breckland, do they need to move to Breckland? Are you saying, do we then define where they should be looking to move in relation to where their relatives are?
I'm talking about somebody who wants to move to a specific village. In some cases, it's a specific road.
That's quite common. Yeah, so we don't, when people apply to us, they're applying to Breckland's housing register. Then we advertise properties across the whole of Breckland, and then the people on the register can apply for any of those, anywhere. So we don't restrict where they can apply to. People do, what we do is review people who are in the highest need in the emergency band. If they're not applying for properties within a certain timescale, then we'll review their application. And if they say they haven't applied for something because nothing's come up in the village they want to be in, then we don't generally take that as an acceptable response. People need to do need to widen their areas of choice, but we have those conversations early on. For anyone in a lower band, silver band, and gold, where it's not about homelessness, then we just leave that up to them if they choose not to, until they complain about there not being anything available, and then we look into their choices again.
Okay, I think there's support for that one.
Thank you. Okay, so coming on to the banding reasons now. Emergency band is our top band. We have over 100 households in this band at the moment, out of 1,700, and we are suggesting removing some of the categories for the emergency band. And it's not because those people won't be supported or dealt with, it's just they're better done through homelessness legislation. So the top one is urgent transfer. This is only for housing association residents. And this doesn't really get used, because if it's an urgent situation and they are an RP tenant, then the RP moves them within their own housing stock. Very occasionally they might ask us if we can help find somewhere for them, but not very often at all. So there's no need for that to be in there, and it does confuse things for applicants. And then the next two, urgent health and safety risk and threatened with serious and immediate violence. If something is so serious that it needs to be in the emergency band, then we should be taking a homelessness application from somebody and considering whether they need temporary accommodation. At the moment, sometimes people think they should be in that band, but they can stay there for as long as they want until the right property comes up. So then we have to question whether it really is urgent or not. So we're better off dealing with things under homelessness legislation, so we can do a proper investigation. Has anyone got any thoughts on those? No. Okay, I'll move on to the final one of those, which is urgent multiple needs. So that's what we call cumulative needs. So at the moment, if someone has 2 gold band needs, then we put them into the emergency band. And I think this is the only one that was complete consensus of in all 4 workshops, that we should remove that, because even if someone has 2 gold band needs, they're not in an emergency situation. And then you'll see the next one after that is cumulative silver band needs going into gold band. Again, at the moment, if you've got 3 silver band needs, you go up into gold. But the workshops were quite clear that they should stay in silver because their need is not as great as people in the gold band. So they're the next 2 suggestions. Any thoughts?
Certainly, there was clear support at the workshop I attended for that one, and it actually made perfect sense.
Okay, thank you. I'll go on to 4.5.5 because I've just included the one above. So this is a new bronze band reason. So as we've just said, we're going to be removing most of the bronze bands, which are people without a housing need. But we, as most of you will know, we do have sites where we have new build outside the normal development reasons called exception sites. So we're allowing building in a small parish to meet the housing needs of that parish or the neighbouring parishes. And that means that sometimes there's people who, I always give this as an example, could be living at home with their parents, they're adults, they're adequately housed under housing legislation and homelessness legislation, they've got their own room, they're living with family, they're safe, but they can't afford to buy or rent somewhere privately in their parish, in their village or in the surrounding area. So these exception sites are designed for those people as well as those with greater housing need. If we exclude those people from the housing register, they're not going to be able to apply for those properties when those sites are developed. So our proposal is allowing having a bronze band for people who don't have a recognised housing need under the allocations policy, but would still meet the qualification for those exception sites. So our proposal is to when the properties are being built, when the schemes are coming up to being let, to making sure that we advertise in conjunction with the housing associations very clearly that people can apply to us to the housing register for those schemes, and then we'll put them on the register. They'll be considered under the cascade agreements for those schemes. They still go to the people in the greatest need who meet that local connection criteria, but sometimes it does go down from emergency gold and silver to people in bronze band. So we want to make sure that they're still eligible for those properties. And then they'll be removed from the register once those properties are let. I think it's a complicated one to explain, but hopefully it makes sense.
Simply, it's about flexibility.
Yeah.
Presumably. I remember in Thetford a significant number of houses, social housing, opening at the same time, and the officers explained to me that actually it's really important that you have a mixture to ensure cohesion on an ongoing basis. They can't all be, of the same type. We need a mix, and that for me seems about allowing flexibility in the policy to address those circumstances, which I think is an improvement. Roger.
Oh.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, I agree with this in principle, but I'm conscious of being parochial here, the Swanton Morley neighbourhood plan. I just wondered if Jill, outside of this forum, wouldn't mind just writing to me confirming that there's no detrimental impact on that. I think it's policy 5 in the neighbourhood plan regarding the exception site. But also, Jill, while you look at that, could you also look at policy 4 in the neighbourhood plan? Because although not an exception site, we have a particular policy called housing for the local community, local lettings policy, and that's regarding on land that's been put forward as part of the neighbourhood plan over and above land in the local plan, and there's specific criteria on there with regard to the affordable housing element of any housing on there. They will have a local connection in perpetuity. So although you may get, say there's half a dozen houses, they get built and then the people on the bronze band get in them, you wouldn't take other people off, I wouldn't think, off the register for that site, because that may become available a couple of months down the line and they would still be eligible. So I just wonder if you wouldn't mind, please, just having a look at policy 4 on the neighbourhood plan, just to confirm to me that, I mean, this looks sensible, as the Chairman said, but I just want to make sure that we're picking up any loose ends. Thank you.
And when those properties do become available for relet, we always go through the same process of following that cascade as well, and we include that in the advert. So that the housing association always let us know, but we also have a record ourselves. But I'll look at it and write to you.
Thank you. Next one.
Next one. Right, so the next one is 4.5.5, and it's another new bronze band reason. So having said I'm getting rid of them, I'm now introducing another one. But this is called reduced preference. So at the moment under our policy, if someone applies to us and they have got rent arrears or they've committed antisocial behaviour, we can legally only say they can't come on our register if we are satisfied that we would get possession order against them if they if we were the landlord and we took them to court. So, and that threshold is quite high. So at the moment, you don't qualify because it's so serious, really, that there has been a possession order against you, or you're on the register. What we're proposing is kind of an in-between. So lower level rent arrears, lower level antisocial behaviour. If you can still apply to the register, but you'd be reduced down to bronze band. So it's called reduced preference under legislation. And when we make that decision, we have to put it in writing, and we will say, at the moment, these are your rent arrears. What you need to do is you need to have a repayment plan over a certain length of time, and you need to be making those payments over a certain length of time. And then when you come back and demonstrate to us that you've done that, then you will go into the band that's higher, that's appropriate for your housing situation. And the same regarding any antisocial behaviour or issues. It will be a period of time without any complaints or issues. So it's giving us a bit more flexibility. It's encouraging people to address their behaviour. And it's also giving housing associations more confidence in our policy that we've also addressed that. Because at the moment, people will come top for property. The housing association will look at them and say, actually, you've got £500 of rent arrears, we're not going to offer this to you. And then that's wasting their time and the customer's time and also our time. So we want to try and reduce the problems and be more clear with people. Okay, any thoughts? And that there is an appendix with a guide to that as well, which will be updated.
I'm seeing nods of approval. I think most members contributed to the workshop, so
yes.
This is a sort of final test to make sure everything's been included.
They might have been in the workshop where they said the complete opposite.
That's true. Well, if they were, they've been quiet about it.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. And you know, the good thing about members having come to the workshop is hopefully you do understand we have thought this through a lot and debated it a lot. It's not just off the top of our heads stuff. Okay, so the next one is direct lets. So as I said, we normally advertise properties. People have the option of applying for them, and the people then in the highest need will be offered those properties. Occasionally, we can make direct lets, so they don't then get advertised. At the moment in our policy, we can do that to people who we've accepted a homelessness duty to and have not been applying for properties within a reasonable time. What we're proposing is that people who are homeless, that could be in our temporary accommodation or threatened with homelessness elsewhere, that we also apply this to them, because that can be for up to 2 months that they're in that position, and they're in gold band during that time. So we're finding that some people aren't bidding for properties during that time because they're waiting to go into emergency band where they think they'll have more choice. So we're looking at a bit more sense of urgency in applying for properties and a bit more realism as well. Of course, as with every application, every situation, it's an individual discussion, and we will look at what has become available and whether it was suitable and reasonable for them to apply for it. Any thoughts?
No. In the workshop I attended, several of us were quite shocked that that was not the case already. So that, again, seems like a sensible improvement.
Okay, final one, which also shocks people that this happens. So at the moment, anyone who is in, or the majority of tenants in social housing do not have to move unless they break their tenancy condition. So we have people living in 4, 5 and 6 bedroom properties who maybe there's just a single person, a couple, or someone with 1 child living there. They don't actually need a property of that size, but there's no incentive for them to move. Over the years, councils and housing associations have tried to incentivise people with money to downsize, but that's not tended to work because they still want space, because they're used to having lots of space. So the proposal is that people living in a 4, 5 or 6 bedroom property are allowed to apply for properties that are smaller but still give them 1 extra bedroom, which we don't normally allow for other applicants. And this is about freeing up those largest properties that we really need for households who are desperately waiting for them. So does anyone have any thoughts on that one?
Peter, please.
Jill, on that, do you know if the housing associations then charge the bedroom tax? That would be an incentive to move them on as well, I think. But.
So the rent that is applicable to anyone living there is about the size of the property, yes. But for anyone who's of pensionable age, that doesn't apply to them. So they still get, if it's housing benefit that they're claiming, it's still covered in full. If they're not claiming benefits, then they have to meet that rent themselves. Yeah.
Okay. Harry, please.
Thank you very much. And can I just first of all thank Jill for the fantastic work we've done on the 4 workshops. And possibly the chairwoman I'm sure is going to ask this, that if members think of further issues after today, if they're able to send that to you. I've got 2 things which don't appear in necessarily in the schedule of things that policy are changing. I've actually read through all the policy as well as the changes. One is around the bedroom requirements, which you may be coming on to, so I'm sorry if I'm getting out of order there. It refers to applicants requiring help in using online bedroom entitlement calculator. That's one question. It's how their attention is drawn to this and if there's any help if they don't have the internet. That's one question. The other question is around Appendix D, sufficient financial resources. Some of these obviously going to relate to national guidance. The savings threshold in there of 16,000, which is the cut-off point, presumably that will change if that changes nationally. The other question in there is under income, average rents, is there any consideration or thought desirable to looking at this more frequent than annually? I'm thinking about because some rents are obviously going to fluctuate much more around energy costs, etc. So those are the only observations I've got going on the whole policy. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you. Regarding the online calculator and anything online, the way we approach all of our applications is an interview, so it's either face-to-face or over the phone. So we always offer that help and we'll give them the information that they need then. The online calculator is just there for anyone that wants to have a look at any time, but if they phone us, we'll always answer that question. Whether the sufficient financial resources, that's based on the limits that are used for benefit calculations as well. But you're right, I suppose at the moment things are fluctuating so greatly that more often than annually probably would be a good idea. So we could look at 6 monthly as well for that. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Harry. Linda, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I certainly enjoyed the workshops. And I'm just delighted that on Tuesday, Shipton were granted planning permission for 102 affordable homes. So that should help you set the stock a bit for the housing associations. The one debate that came up at our workshop was how you communicate this to the public. Now, as a council, cross-party, we try to be open and transparent. And I think however we do it, whether it's through the magazine, well, I'm sure it will be through the magazine, social media, direct contact with tenants, that we are absolutely straight with them so that people don't sit there still hoping that the council will give them a house, because that's still the perception. Yeah. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Jill.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have talked about this in the last few weeks as well, about the changes that we're implementing are a good opportunity to do that kind of realisation check with people, really. I always say 50% of the job of the housing team is managing expectations, but some people don't like them being managed, so we have to keep doing it over and over again. So I think not allowing people onto the register is part of that managing the expectations. They're not going to get somewhere even if they're on there. At the moment, we have put it on social media about the consultation on the allocations policy, but changing the policy is only part of it. It's the ongoing work that we do with people. So that's one of the reasons why we like to do a face-to-face or telephone appointment and not have people applying online, because those conversations are really important. But I do think that we could do more in the future to just keep reminding people that their housing situation might not be what they dream of, but it is good compared to lots of other people's situations, and we can't help everybody who applies to us, unfortunately. We only have a legal obligation to people under homelessness and to nobody else that applies. So it doesn't mean to say that we don't care about them. It's just, yeah, we can't.
Thank you. Does that give you answers to all of the changes that you wanted, Jill? I think we've sort of reached the end of the list there. Does anybody have any further general points about the changes or the policy as a whole? Hazel, please.
Yeah, quite general, really. Just wondering if you, in your professional opinion, feel that these changes in the draft adequately cover what the housing team require to best serve Breckland, kind of within the resources available?
Yeah, this policy really is about managing a scarce resource. So it doesn't give us more homes, which is what we need. It doesn't give us more social housing, but it helps us in reducing the work that the officers are doing. So at the moment, we spend a lot of time, because we're thorough in what we're doing, assessing applications that are never going to be successful. And they're the ones without the housing need, but we still have to go through the same process. So if we stop doing that, that then frees up some officer time to focus more on the people with the greatest housing need. So it doesn't give us the homes that we need, but it helps us manage the work a little bit better.
Okay, thank you. And the only general point I was going to make, Jill, and I read the appendices, and it refers quite a lot to the need to obtain medical information as supporting paperwork. And I know from my own casework that that's increasingly difficult to get that information. GPs, hospitals, getting those supporting documents, they're pressed, and that's often low down the priority list. And I was conscious that our housing staff, although they might have some medical knowledge, some medical training, they're not medical professionals. How do we sort of manage the lack of information that's coming to support a housing application and make the right decision? Because that's essentially what we need to do. And I'm also concerned about the delay to, often in cases that I've dealt with, the delay to their housing application processing is because of that delay with the medical information. How does that tie in with the policy? Because it constantly refers to supporting medical information.
It is a difficulty getting the information that we need sometimes. We do pay for those reports, and sometimes that speeds it up a little bit, but not always. I think the experience that the team have of dealing with applications enables them to make an initial assessment based on the information that the customer's giving. So if we think actually this is urgent and is serious, then we'll push much more than those that are not so urgent, and we'll follow it up. But we don't have the resources to push it that much. One thing we are talking about with all of the district councils and also with the county council is the need for an occupational therapist resource just for housing to do these applications. So we just started those discussions with the county, which, if it came to anything, would make things quicker, I think.
That's reassuring.
Yeah.
Thank you. Roger.
Yeah, just the last point for you, Jill. In the report, obviously, you say there's 1,700 applicants. We've got about 400 houses a year. Do you have any sense, when you've done this work, of how much you're going to reduce that 1,700 figure by? And would you agree that we've still got a very significant problem with the lack of housing to meet the demand? And I would urge, as a member of planning, we need to, as members, make as many people aware of these facts as possible when it comes to planning applications and the sort of NIMBY, not build anything near me brigade, because there's a lot of attempts out there to stymie affordable housing applications. I think generally that's a wider thing, cross-party for all members to take account of. We do need these houses, but do you have a sense of how much that'll improve the situation?
Yeah, so we have between 300 and 400 applicants in bronze band at the moment that don't have a housing need. So they, sounds awful, they're the quick wins. But them being on there doesn't affect anybody else anyway in the higher bands, because they're never going to come above those people in the highest bands. So you've got 1,300 to 1,400 households at the moment on our housing register who do have a housing need. Each of those will be assessed. We're not going to do a mass reassessment of those 1,400. They'll be assessed annually on the anniversary of their application date or if we're dealing with them at any point in between. So between 400 and 500 properties a year we're getting, that we know it doesn't meet the need that we've got there. One of the biggest issues we have is that we have a huge need for one-bedroom properties, and of those 400 to 500, only about 40 or 50 of those are one beds for people under 55 or under 60, and there's a mismatch. So at the moment we've got about 70 single people in temporary accommodation, and we know that that's just not enough to meet their needs alone, let alone everyone else who's applying. So.
Okay, thank you. So we've gone through each of the changes. It will go to Cabinet and Council, but are members of the Commission happy to endorse the changes to the policy as presented? Yep, lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jill, for taking us through that and answering the questions. I'm going to move on to the next agenda item then, which is item number 11, the Q2 Finance Performance and Projects Report. We've got Paul here still and Alison. Alison, are you going to introduce this one, or you can give Paul a break? You'll introduce it, and then Alison could, between you, deal.
It will be a double act. Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased, along with Councillor Alison Webb, to present to the committee today the Q2 Finance Performance and Project Report. This was presented to Cabinet on the 27th of November with no issues raised, and I'm now presenting to you today. I'm aware that Councillor Cowan, Executive Member for Finance, Revenues and Benefits, is not present. However, the awesome Ali will be able to answer any questions you might have on some of the financial reports, and our other officer colleagues, Matthew, Claire and Mark, will be able to answer any other questions that arise from this report. So I'll initially, if I may, make a brief statement that Councillor Cowan did prepare, outlining the main elements of the financial elements of this report and the accompanying appendices. Colleagues, good morning. Apologies once again for not being present today to present this report in person. If there are any questions that can't be answered during this meeting, a written response will be provided as soon as possible. Since taking up the reins of the finance portfolio, I can say without hesitation that the economic circumstances that provide the background to the report before you and this council are unprecedented. When at the start of the fiscal year, in Q1, we project an overspend to one degree or another, usually during the year, as time moves forwards, that overspend typically might improve. This is a pattern to which we've become accustomed. However, this year, as you can see from the report appendices, in Q2, we're showing an increased forecast revenue overspend from that report at Q1 to around 507,000. Put it another way, a variance has increased by £81,000, this despite the savings that have been made as identified and outlined in Appendix A. Appendix A does identify the rationale behind this increase. The largest amongst the variances are housing benefit payments and planning income, which is a picture that is facing local authorities nationally. Together, these account for about £1.3 million. In addition, the revenue forecast also shows overspends in inflation, utility costs, legal costs, recycling and trade waste costs, and procurement. And the notes attached to the appendix expands on those positions. The large overspend is tempered by our ability to divert some reserves and receive a benefit from higher interest rates achievable due to current external market conditions. The pressures we're feeling right now are not of our own making. And indeed, thanks to our record of sound financial management, we are in a better position to weather the perfect storm caused by a combination of housing demands and reduction in planning fee income, mainly attributable to drop-offs in major planning applications. However, we continue to do what we can to minimise the effect of these external factors, whilst pursuing in the acquisition of further housing to reduce both unit costs of temporary accommodation whilst retaining an asset for the future. At the same time, we're driving forward the opportunities offered by growing commercial waste, developing skills that enable us to provide services to others, for example, through ARP and their expertise in identifying fraud, and exploring other areas where sharing of our services and our skills are beneficial, such as our procurement team work externally and our projects team internally. In summary, Chair and Commission members, these figures and the projection for the year do not make for comfortable reading, and there is no doubt that with a lean and fit-for-purpose organisation, areas and opportunities to do more to minimise revenue, to minimise costs, maximise revenues, and minimise our exposures are limited. These are challenging times ahead of us, and the government announcement on spending review last week doesn't necessarily make for pleasing reading, as it doesn't for all councils. But I'm confident that Team Breckland can and will rise to the challenge, as we have always done, to deliver on our key priorities and to take the decisions necessary to enable our businesses and our residents to thrive.
Thank you, Paul.
Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Councillor Hewitt. Good morning, everybody. OK, I'm pleased to present to the committee today the Q2 performance report. A summary for each area is: this report highlights some of the great work that the Council is currently doing, also highlights some areas which we wish to improve on in the next few months. We have seen some pleasing data from most areas, with a particular improvement in complaints responded to within the timescale. Last quarter, Q1, 96% were responded to within the timescale, and pleasingly this quarter, this was 100%, which is very good. We have also included the key performance indicators relating to our staff survey, which we carry out annually. You will see there are some excellent results showing that we continue to maintain and build on last year's also fantastic results. We've also seen an improvement in the freedom of information requests responded to within the timescales. Work continues to understand and resolve the root cause of these delays. We've seen an improvement from 88% in Q1 to 93% in Q2, which shows that that's going the right way, but there's still way to go. Areas which are challenging include the number of missed bins. However, much of this was due to high levels of sickness and annual leave during September, following the August bank holiday, and whilst we are learning from that, improvements have already been seen in the last month. The percentage of food safety intervention actions taken on 0 to 2 National Food Hygiene Rating Standards rated businesses within 2 months fell to 80% this quarter, which equates to 1 instance where action was not taken within the required 2 months. All other metrics in this service are either at or above the target. Thank you for that, and I'll pass back to Councillor Hewitt. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. On the projects part of the report, Commission members in front of you, there are currently 39 live projects in delivery across the Council. Work's been going on since Q1 to ensure that all projects are prioritised both accurately and responsibly and allow for member oversight throughout this process. A summary of the major projects currently being overseen by this Council and by the Corporate Products Service are included within Appendix C of the report that's presented in front of you. And I would just like to highlight just 2 or 3 of these, of which I think the projects team and our projects service are justifiably proud. On the temporary accommodation and housing investment side, some 11 properties have been purchased across the district to provide temporary accommodation for homeless households, and all of these are now occupied, ready for Christmas. On the early intervention, the housing community side is a new project, and we've been hearing just previously about some of the challenges around our housing community's needs from our services. But this new project, internally commissioned, is reviewing the ways in which our housing communities team can collaborate better to improve the processing of complex housing cases to ensure a more efficient solution meets the needs and requirements of our resident clients. Work is underway. It's an early stage project, but we're quite excited in terms of the outcome moving forwards. And finally, on the solar side, feasibility studies have been completed, reports received to outline the options in relation to potential installation of solar panels at some of our key strategic and council-owned properties. Detailed design work is almost complete. Our current focus is delivering on the scheme at Durham Leisure Centre which will have a positive impact on our 2035 objectives and which this council have previously looked at and approved. Chair, thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you very much, Alison. Does anybody have any questions, please? I would note that Councillor Cowan's finance portfolio is on the work programme for February. He's coming to present the draft budget, but also his portfolio overall. So I think that would be a good opportunity to probe those sort of wider finance issues then. Questions more on the projects and performance side, most relevant. Harry?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you very much for that, Paul and Alison. My focus is on the finance side, and I'm probably getting word blindness looking at all the different spreadsheets and permutations we've got so far this morning. I'm pleased to note under 3.8 under capital, there's below budget spend, and we're monitoring in-year progress. And obviously, as the Chairman, as Terry's referred to, I think Q3 is going to be crucial in terms of how we're focusing on the year ahead. In this particular report this time, under 3.3, you've mentioned obviously there the 752k above budget spend on revenue, how that overspent above budget spend has been mitigated from the general fund, which you put there at about 408k. How much is left in the general fund? They might have to refer to the Super A over there, because obviously for lay people like myself, it's hard sometimes keeping track of the different funds and what's going to and fro. Well, I'm interested in the net position. So we've taken that from the general fund. So what will be left in the general fund to call on, on a future occasion if we've got problems on the revenue side? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So the general fund would be down to 2.5 million. And when we bring the Q3 report forward, you'll see recommendations within there on where we would fund the remainder from for you.
Thank you. I see no further questions. I think it's short and sweet today because as I say, we're going to have that finance discussion at a later point. We're required to note the update. Members happy to note? Thank you very much. Thank you very much for attending to your team. We'll move on to item 12, outside body feedback. We've had an update circulated from Councillor Bambridge. Is there anything, Gordon, you want to add to that report that's been circulated?
No, you've had a long meeting. I won't add anything, but if anyone wants to talk to me, I'm happy to do so.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for a written update. I think that's really useful to understand the issues. Any further outside body feedback reports, please? I'll take Robert Clyburn first.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, on behalf of the Norfolk Museums Committee, I've attended meetings of the 4 individual area committees. There's a new exhibition at King's Lynn, The Tiger Who Came to Tea, during which they discovered that their stuffed tiger was known as Horace, but is actually female, is renamed Horatio. And the council project continues with a planned opening summer next year with no specific date nailed, but a very interesting visit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Peter, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just an update on the Breckland Yab. Their next project is going to be on inclusion playgrounds across the district, and there will be a launch in the new year, and I will let members know the date to attend this launch in a nearby venue. Also, as representative at the QEH Governors, they've now had planning permission to temporarily remove the helipad at the hospital there to allow the spade to go into where they're going to build the new hospital. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Any further outside body reports? No, thank you to the 3 of you for those. Moving on, item 13, scrutiny call-ins. I don't believe there have been any. 14, councillor call for action. Again, there are none. 15, the work programme. We populated the work programme last month, and you'll see that we've got Sam Chapman-Allen, leader of the council, coming on the 18th of January from memory. And then, as I mentioned, Phil Cowan coming in February. So we've got two, what I'm sure will be very informative and useful meetings coming up. Any comments from members on the work programme, please? Linda.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to explain the item at the very bottom, which is two references from GP back to overview and scrutiny. Because general purposes, we made decisions on things, and decisions are good, but you need to monitor them and see what the outcomes are. And in consultation with the officers, it was agreed it would be better to come back to ONS. So I hope that is
Yes,
okay.
I did see your email about that. I'm very grateful for pointing that out.
Just wondered, Chairman, if there'd been any update from UK Power Networks regarding the request for them to come on the 18th of January.
I know Ruth was working on that, but she's not here today, and I haven't had a specific update, but we'll get back to you as soon as we can. But as I say, I spoke to her earlier part of this month on that, so there has been a bit of progress, but whether or not they're confirmed, I'm not sure. Okay, item 16 to note, the date of the next meeting, as mentioned, is the 18th of January at 10 a.m. I now need to move to item 17, which is the exclusion of the press and public, and I need to read the following, that under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of Schedule 12A to the Act. Are members in agreement that we exclude the press and public? Thank you very much. We shall move on to Part B, give a chance to leave. No, okay. Harry, what would be the wording of your proposal, please?
Wording of my proposal is the Commission is not entirely happy with the proposal to go for option 1, which is disposal at this time and on these terms, and recommends that we hold on to the asset.
I'm
and
paraphrasing.
And ask Cabinet to go for option 2.
So what I'm hearing is you're proposing the Commission does not support the disposal of the asset on the terms presented.
And I'm assuming that if I don't have a seconder for that proposal, then it falls.
Okay, you happy with that wording?
Amended wording. Yes.
My wording. William, you indicated you'd like to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just to say, I'd like to propose that we accept the recommendation.
Okay, I'll take them in the order they came. Is there a seconder, please, for Councillor Clark's proposal? Hazel? So we'll take a vote on that one first, please. I mean, they're kind of one or the other anyway. So the proposal from Councillor Clark is that the Commission does not support the disposal of the asset on the terms presented. I'd like to ask that that's a recorded vote, please, which I have the power to do as Chairman. All those in favour of that recommendation? That's 3. All those against? Thank you very much. You happy with that? Yeah. And a proposal from Councillor Nunn, which is to support the recommendation as presented. Would somebody like to second, please? Councillor Peter Wilkinson. All those in favour? All those against? Thank you. You've seen the Cabinet members. You've seen the view of the Commission. Good luck with your decision at 2 o'clock. There being no further business, this meeting is closed. Thank you all for your attendance and contributions. And may I take the opportunity to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.